Psalms chapter 5 is another psalm of David. This one is to the chief the chief musician at Nehiloth. So another location, different than chapter 4. So this is the lyrics that David is writing to send to this musician who's going to put it into music. So let's jump in here. Verse 1, give ear to my words, O Lord, consider my meditation. Hearken unto the voice of my cry, my King and my God, for unto thee will I pray. So this is again a prayer song that he is doing. This is as if he's offering up a prayer. He's written the prayer down. He's going to have it set to music to express his ideas to God, and others can then read it and utilize it. So he says in here, verse 3, my voice shalt thou hear in the morning, O Lord. In the morning will I direct my prayer unto thee, and will look up. For thou art not a God that hath pleasure in wickedness, neither shall evil dwell with thee. The foolish shall not stand in thy sight. Thou hatest all workers of iniquity. Thou shalt destroy them that speak leasing. The Lord will abhor the bloody and deceitful man. So he's talking about here that God is going to hear my voice in the morning. He's praying in the morning. Early morning prayers was a very common tradition to start your day with a prayer. Basically, is important. And he's talking about how that the wickedness, the people who choose that other path, not the righteous path, but the other path, are going to struggle and not have God help them in their life. Basically, verse 7, he says, "But as for me, I will come into thy house in the multitude of thy mercy, and in thy fear I will worship toward thy holy temple." So he says, these people over here are going to be bad, and they're not going to be blessed and prospered. But as for me, I am going to serve you. I'm going to pitch my tent. I'm going to set myself up so I'm looking at the temple. I'm focusing on the temple, having my sight set on God and his way of doing things, basically. So verse 8, lead me, O Lord, in thy righteousness because of mine enemies. Make thy way straight before my face. So he's saying basically, help me understand what you want me to do. Help me to know the commandments I need to keep. Verse 9, for there is no faithfulness in their mouth. Their inward part is very wickedness. Their throat is an open sepulchre. They flatter with their tongue. Now, this is really interesting to think about this. No faithfulness in their mouth. So the words that they're saying is an important thing, because it even says in here that their throat is an open sepulchre. A sepulchre is a place where a person is buried. An open sepulchre is an empty place, so their throat is empty. Their words are not of faith. They are not keeping the commandments. They're not doing what's right. They're not believing in God. Their philosophies are contrary to God's, basically, to the commandments. Because words come from thoughts. So our words tell us how we are thinking and what's going on in our mind. So if they're empty of truth, then their thoughts are empty of truth as well. And it says here too, they flatter with their tongue. So they say great things, but it is not substantive of truth, is what he's talking about here, basically. Their inward parts is very wickedness. So they have wickedness inside. Inward parts is like your internal organs. Inside of you, your intention inside is wickedness, and that is bleeding into your words of saying things that come from a state of wickedness, basically, rather than a state of righteousness inside. So that's a great philosophy as well. In the neuro-linguistic programming discipline, there's this neurological levels area that's really great, based on some work from, I want to say Robert Bateson, but I can't remember if that's his first name or not. They're talking about how learning takes place at different levels. So our words come from our thoughts, from our inner parts. Our thoughts come from the beliefs and identity we have. So if wickedness is at the core of us, that will bleed to the outside of us as well, basically. Verse 10, destroy thou them, O God, let them fall by their own counsels. Cast them out in the multitude of their transgressions, for they have rebelled against thee. Fascinating thing in here that he's talking about, of course, is Let them fall by their own counsels. If you go back to chapter 1 of Psalms, we talk about the way of the two paths, having agency. Let them be responsible for their own problems. We don't have to actively punish them. They will do it to themselves, basically. They're going to disobey the commandments, and it's going to cause them problems. It's going to have this natural effect that hurts them. So he's basically saying they chose to go against you. They're being punished because of what they chose, not because of what you've done, basically. Verse 11, but let all those that put their trust in thee rejoice. So these are the people who made the other choice. Let them ever shout for joy because thou defendest them. Let them also that love thy name be joyful in thee. For thou, Lord, wilt bless the righteous. With favor wilt thou compass him as with a shield. Now, it's important to realize, like we talked about in the book of Job, this concept of the gospel of prosperity, meaning that if I am prosperous in life, all great things come from God, and that if I have lots of great things, it's because God is blessing me. That's not always the case. So being prosperous of God, it doesn't mean wealthy in monetary terms. Being prosperous of God can mean eternal life, spiritual prosperity, not mortal or temporal prosperity. So we have to be careful how we phrase these, because some of these terms have been used to justify believing that physical prosperity or temporal prosperity, our financial prosperity, is a blessing from God because we are righteous. We cannot make that assumption that righteousness and financial blessings are the same thing, or that wickedness and lack of finances is the same thing. That's false. That is very false. So we have to be careful with that. You have to think more spiritually. God will bless us, maybe not with monetary things, but He will bless us with spiritual wealth and prosperity as well, which is more about the next life than this life. So we got to always just be careful about that distinction in there. So let's jump over to the next chapter as we continue to learn from the book of Psalms.